The millionaire CEO rejected 8 models but can't stop thinking about a single mother delivery girl. Emily Carter's Thursday evening had already been chaos before she even pulled into the circular driveway of Parkview Towers, the kind of luxury high-rise she usually only saw in magazines. In the back seat, her 5-year-old son Noah was nodding off against his booster seat, a coloring book still open in his lap. In the passenger seat sat a warm bag of gourmet takeout she'd picked up late after traffic had turned her 30-minute route into an hour-long crawl. She jogged toward the glass doors, Noah in her arms, his little sneakers bumping against her hip. The uniform cap she wore sat crooked on her head, and she could feel the sweat cooling on her neck. The doorman barely managed a good evening before she was past him, eyes fixed on the glowing elevator call button. Up on the 22nd floor, the client, a rail-thin woman with diamond studs and the kind of glare that could freeze lava, opened the door before Emily even knocked. "You're late," the woman said sharply. 1 minute past the promised delivery time. Emily blinked. "Ma'am, it was traffic and I've got my—" "I don't want it anymore," the woman interrupted, crossing her arms. Emily bit back the reply she wanted to give, holding Noah closer. She could feel his little hand pressing into her shoulder. She forced herself to stay calm. "Maybe you'd rather I ran red lights with my kid in the car to make your sushi deadline." The woman's expression only hardened, but before the argument could escalate, Noah made a small sound, a cough that seemed normal for a second, then another sharper one that made Emily's heart lurch. His cough became wheezing gasps. "Noah, honey, breathe for me," Emily said urgently, shifting him so she could see his face. His lips were paling, and panic flared in her chest. The woman at the door took a step back, muttering something about calling security, but someone else was already moving toward them. Jonathan Price, tall, dark suit, the type of man who radiated control, had been waiting near the elevators, but now he was at Emily's side in 2 strides. "Does he have asthma?" he asked quickly. "No, never like this before," Emily stammered, trying to steady her shaking hands. Jonathan's jaw tightened. He pulled out his phone, dialing without hesitation. "This is Jonathan Price. I need an ambulance at Parkview Towers and 22nd floor, child in respiratory distress." He snapped his phone shut, then looked at Emily. "My car's in the garage. It'll be faster than waiting." "Let's go." Emily hesitated. He was a stranger after all, but one look at Noah's wide, terrified eyes made the decision for her. "Okay." She breathed. In the parking garage, Jonathan's sleek black sedan roared to life. Emily cradled Noah in the back seat, whispering reassurances, while Jonathan cut through the city traffic with surgical precision. At the hospital entrance, a pediatric team was waiting, whisking Noah inside. Emily reached for her wallet, her words tumbling out. "I don't have insurance, but I'll work out a payment plan." Jonathan simply handed his card to the admissions clerk. "Full coverage. Best care available," he said firmly, then softer to Emily. "Focus on him. We'll sort everything else out later." It was the first time that night Emily felt her knees wobble, not from exhaustion, but from realizing that sometimes help came from the most unexpected places. 2 weeks had passed since that frantic night at Parkview Towers, and Emily Carter still couldn't shake the memory of Jonathan Price, the man who had appeared out of nowhere, taken charge, and made sure Noah was safe. Noah was back to chasing toy trucks across the living room rug, but Emily's mind kept circling one stubborn thought she owed him. Not just a polite thank you, not just a batch of cookies or a handwritten card. She owed him in dollars and cents. Medical bills like the ones Jonathan had paid weren't pocket change, and Emily Carter did not take charity. That's what brought her to the glossy, intimidating lobby of Price & Co., the towering glass headquarters in the heart of downtown. She'd taken a bus, clutching the crumpled notebook, where she'd been calculating how many extra deliveries it would take to cover a hospital bill that had to be in the thousands. The receptionist, a woman with perfect hair and a cool smile, eyed Emily's well-worn jeans and faded jacket before asking, "Do you have an appointment?" "No," Emily said evenly, "but I need to see Jonathan Price. It's personal." The receptionist's polite smile didn't budge, but she tapped a few keys. "Mr. Price is in a meeting. I can—" Before she could finish the elevator, doors opened and Jonathan stepped out, flanked by 2 executives in tailored suits. He was mid-sentence but stopped when his gaze landed on Emily. Surprise flickered across his face. "Emily, how's Noah?" "He's good, healthy. Thanks to you," she said, straightening her shoulders. "I'm here because I need to talk about the money." Jonathan frowned. "What money?" "The hospital bill. I'm going to pay you back." She opened her notebook, flipping to the page where she'd scribbled figures. "It'll take me a while, but I can do it in installments." "How much was it?" "Emily, forget it." "No," she cut in, her voice sharper now. "I don't forget debts. You tell me the number, I'll pay every penny." Jonathan's lips twitched as if holding back a smile. "You don't even know what you're getting into." It was over 6,000. Emily's eyes widened, but she lifted her chin. "Then I'll work double, triple if I have to." It was at that moment another voice joined in, deeper, older, with a hint of amusement. "Jonathan, aren't you going to introduce me?" Emily turned to see a distinguished man in a tailored charcoal suit, silver hair perfectly combed, watching her with sharp interest. Jonathan sighed. "Emily, this is my father, Charles Price." Charles's handshake was warm, but his eyes were calculating. "Miss Carter, I admire your determination. It's refreshing." Emily didn't know it yet, but Charles Price was already filing her name and face away, turning over possibilities in his mind, the kind of possibilities that could change her life, for better or worse. Jonathan, oblivious to his father's growing curiosity, was still trying to wave her off. "Emily, I said forget the debt." She met his gaze head on. "And I said I won't. I'm not a charity case, Mr. Price." For just a moment, something softened in Jonathan's expression, a flicker of respect. Charles noticed it too, and in that instant, a quiet seed of an idea began to take root. It was a month later when Emily Carter found herself balancing a silver tray of champagne flutes in the glittering ballroom of the Westbrook Hotel. The air shimmered with soft light from crystal chandeliers, and the guests, all dressed in sleek gowns and tailored tuxedos, glided between marble columns like they'd stepped straight out of a fashion spread. Emily had taken the catering job through a friend's connection. The pay was decent, and she'd learned how to move quietly, smile politely, and avoid the kind of people who looked at name tags before making eye contact. Tonight was supposed to be just another gig. Until she spotted him. Jonathan Price standing across the room, deep in conversation with a circle of donors. He looked different here than he had at the hospital, polished, commanding every line of his suit perfect. For a second, Emily froze, her grip on the tray tightening. She turned to leave the room, but fate had other plans. A guest waved her over, and as Emily pivoted, her heel caught the edge of the ornate rug. The tray tilted, time slowed, and 12 glasses of champagne cascaded forward in a golden arc. Straight on to Jonathan Price. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Champagne dripped from his immaculate white shirt, soaking his jacket. Emily's face burned. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry," she blurted, fumbling for a napkin. "I'll pay for the cleaning, the dry cleaning, the everything." Jonathan held up a hand, a small smirk tugging at his lips. "Emily, breathe. It's just champagne." Before she could stammer out another apology, a smooth voice floated over her shoulder. "Now, this is interesting." She turned to see Charles Price smiling, like a man who just stumbled upon a rare opportunity. "Miss Carter," he said warmly. "We keep meeting in the most memorable circumstances." Emily straightened. "Sorry about your son's suit. I swear I'm usually more coordinated." "Don't apologize," Charles said, his eyes glinting. "In fact, you might be the answer to a little problem we've been having." Emily frowned. "What kind of problem?" Charles took her elbow, guiding her toward a quieter corner. "Jonathan's reputation. The press loves to paint him as a cold, unattached bachelor, and investors unfortunately prefer a man who looks settled, respectable. That's where you come in." Emily blinked. "Excuse me, I'd like you to pose as Jonathan's girlfriend," Charles said, as if discussing the weather. "Attend events, be photographed together. You'd be compensated handsomely, of course, enough to secure Noah's future." Emily's jaw dropped. No, I can't fake date your son. That's a lie. It's marketing," Charles corrected smoothly. "And marketing is all about the story you tell. Think about it. Miss Carter private school tuition for Noah, paid in full, plus a generous fee for each appearance. 1 year of pretending, and your son never has to worry again." Emily shook her head, but her fingers twitched at the thought of Noah's asthma medication, the overdue rent notice on her fridge. Jonathan's not going to agree to this. "Leave Jonathan to me," Charles said, with the confidence of a man who always got his way. Emily didn't realize it then, but that spilled champagne had just changed the course of her life. 3 weeks later, Emily Carter was standing outside the glass front doors of the Marina Club, clutching the strap of her borrowed evening clutch like it was a lifeline. The soft glow of dock lights shimmered over the water, and the muffled hum of conversation drifted out each time a guest entered. Inside, somewhere among the crisp linen tablecloths and vintage wine lists, Jonathan Price was waiting. Emily still wasn't sure how Charles Price had pulled it off, but here she was, the girlfriend for hire. It had taken several long, awkward conversations and more than one stubborn stare down, but Jonathan had finally agreed to go along with his father's scheme for the sake of keeping corporate peace. The hostess spotted her lingering in the doorway and offered a welcoming smile. "Right this way, Ms. Carter. Mr. Price's table is ready." Emily followed her through a dining room that looked like a scene from a movie. Tall windows framing the moonlit marina, a jazz trio playing softly in the corner. When she reached the table, Jonathan rose, pulling out her chair like a perfect gentleman. "Evening," he said, his voice calm, but his eyes scanning her as if trying to read her mood. Emily sat smoothing the skirt of the dark blue dress Charles's stylist had insisted she wear. "Let's just remember, we're here to pretend." "Okay," she murmured. Jonathan's lips curved faintly. "Trust me, I have no problem remembering." 2 other people were already seated, Daniel Foster, one of Jonathan's longtime business partners, and his wife Marlene. Elegant, poised, and clearly curious about this girlfriend no one had ever heard of. "We've been dying to meet you," Marlene said with a warm smile. "Jonathan tells us you two met, unexpectedly." You could say that Jonathan replied, leaning back in his chair. "She once poured an entire tray of champagne on me." Emily gave an embarrassed laugh. "In my defense, the rug attacked my heel. Completely unprovoked." Daniel chuckled, and the tension at the table eased. Menus arrived, and Emily scanned hers, overwhelmed by the French names and unfamiliar descriptions. She leaned toward Jonathan. "Which fork is for the appetizer again?" she whispered. "Outside in," he whispered back. She grinned. "And if I go inside out, will they throw me in the marina?" Jonathan's smirk deepened. "Maybe just make you swab the deck." By the time the entrees arrived, Emily had Marlene laughing so hard she nearly spilled her wine. She told stories about delivering pizzas in the middle of blizzards, about Noah insisting ketchup was a vegetable, about the time she accidentally signed for a neighbor's Amazon package and ended up babysitting their parrot for a week. Jonathan, against his better judgment, found himself relaxing, even enjoying it. She wasn't like anyone else in this world. She didn't measure her words or calculate her charm. She just was. And somehow that made people lean in. When dessert arrived, Daniel lifted his glass. "To Emily," he said warmly. "The most refreshing dinner guest we've had in a long time." Emily blinked, caught off guard by the genuine compliment. She glanced at Jonathan, and for the first time since agreeing to this arrangement, she saw something in his eyes that wasn't skepticism. It was interest. The governor's ball was the kind of event Emily Carter had only ever seen on television. And even then, it looked less intimidating on a screen. The grand ballroom of the historic Harrington Hotel gleamed under a dozen crystal chandeliers with gold-trimmed balconies overlooking the polished marble floor. A string quartet played softly in the corner, their music weaving through the low hum of elegant conversation. Emily smoothed the skirt of her emerald green gown, the one Charles Price's stylist had insisted was impossibly flattering. She was here on Jonathan's arm, smiling for the occasional camera flash, her mind rehearsing polite small talk like lines in a play. They were making their way toward the refreshment tables when Emily felt the temperature in the room drop a few degrees. From across the floor, a tall, statuesque woman in a sapphire gown approached her every step, radiating purpose. "Jonathan," she said smoothly, her voice dripping with familiarity. "It's been far too long." Victoria, Jonathan replied, his tone polite but cool. Emily recognized the name instantly. Victoria Lane, the glamorous ex Jonathan had once dated, the one tabloid still occasionally paired with his name. Victoria's gaze flicked to Emily, her smile sharp. "And you must be—" "Emily Carter," Emily said, offering a hand. "Nice to meet you." Victoria's handshake was cool, her eyes scanning Emily from head to toe. What an interesting dress. Very approachable. Emily's smile didn't falter. Thank you. I wanted something that wouldn't draw too much attention. I don't like being vulgar. Victoria's brows arched, and a faint chuckle rippled through a nearby group who'd overheard. So, Emily Victoria pressed on, what do you do besides date? I work in deliveries, Emily said simply. It's honest work. I help people get what they need. How noble, Victoria replied, her tone light but edged. It must be challenging to adjust to this environment. Emily tilted her head. It's fascinating, actually, especially seeing how some people can be so elegant on the outside and so tiny on the inside. A man nearby coughed to hide his laugh. Victoria's smile tightened. You're quite direct. I guess I am, Emily said pleasantly. In my world, if you've got bad energy, you toss a ring of salt around it and keep it contained. The surrounding circle chuckled openly now. Even Jonathan's lips twitched. Victoria's eyes narrowed ever so slightly. Well, Jonathan, I hope you're enjoying this new adventure. I am, Jonathan said, without hesitation, glancing at Emily with a look that made her pulse skip. Very much. By the time Victoria moved on, the crowd's mood had shifted entirely. Emily had turned what could have been an ambush into a win, and Jonathan knew it. As they stepped away from the group, he leaned closer. You're dangerous with a smile, you know that. Emily smirked. Guess we make a good team then. Jonathan didn't answer, but the way his gaze lingered told her he was thinking the same thing. The spring fundraiser at the Metropolitan Conservatory was supposed to be just another carefully staged appearance for Emily Carter and Jonathan Price. The evening had gone smoothly. A steady stream of polite greetings, a few photos with donors, and a round of small talk over champagne flutes. By the time they stepped out into the cool night air, Emily was already imagining trading her heels for sneakers. They were halfway to Jonathan's car when Emily slowed her attention, snagged by a figure sitting slumped on a bench under a flickering street lamp. Even from a distance, she could see the woman's hands trembling, her head bowed as though she were struggling just to stay upright. Jonathan, Emily said, tugging his sleeve. That lady doesn't look well. He followed her gaze, then shook his head slightly. It's almost midnight. She might not want strangers approaching, or she might need someone to help her, Emily countered, already heading toward the bench. The woman looked up as Emily approached, revealing a face lined with age and worry. Ma'am, are you all right? Emily asked gently. I think it's my heart, the woman murmured, her voice faint. Short of breath. Chest feels tight. Jonathan was beside them now, his concern immediate. Do you have medication? Ran out, she admitted, her eyes fluttering shut for a moment. Couldn't afford more this month. Emily met Jonathan's eyes, her voice firm. We need to get her to a hospital. The woman shook her head weakly. No ambulance? Too expensive. I'll drive, Jonathan said without hesitation. Between the two of them, they helped the woman. She introduced herself as Margaret, into the car. Emily kept up a steady stream of calm chatter during the ride, asking about Margaret's favorite foods, her children, even her childhood dog. Anything to keep her talking, to keep her anchored. At St. Matthew's Hospital, Jonathan handled the check-in and payment while Emily stayed with Margaret until she was settled in a room. A doctor confirmed it was a hypertensive crisis, serious but treatable, and admitted her for observation. Over the next 3 days, Emily and Jonathan visited daily. Emily brought crossword puzzles and fresh flowers. Jonathan brought Margaret's favorite soup from a little diner he knew. By the time she was discharged, Margaret was smiling again. Her color returned. On their last visit, Margaret took Emily's hand. You two, you make a good team, she said softly. Don't forget that. Back in the car, Jonathan was quiet for a long moment before speaking. You didn't even hesitate, he said finally. Neither did you, Emily replied. Jonathan glanced at her, a faint smile playing at the corners of his mouth. Maybe Margaret's right. Emily looked out at the city lights streaking past the window, her heart thudding in a way that had nothing to do with adrenaline. For the first time, the word pretend felt a little less certain. It was supposed to be a quick overnight trip to Boston, in and out just long enough for Jonathan Price to attend an investor meeting and for Emily Carter to stand by his side playing the role she'd been hired to play. But as they sat in the departure lounge at JFK, an announcement blared over the intercom. Attention passengers, Flight 221 to Boston has been canceled due to severe weather. All flights to Boston are grounded until further notice. Emily glanced out the terminal windows. Snowflakes were already swirling against the glass, the kind that stuck and thickened in minutes. Jonathan checked his phone, jaw tightening. We can't wait this out. The meeting's tomorrow morning. What now? Emily asked. We drive. I know a place we can stop for the night, an inn about halfway there. 3 hours later, the wipers beat a steady rhythm as Jonathan's car crawled along the snow-covered highway. By the time they reached Willow Creek Inn, the storm was in full force wind, howling through the pines. Inside, the air was warm, the fire in the lobby crackling, and the scent of cinnamon tea drifting from the reception desk. There's just one room left, the receptionist explained. King bed, but the couch is comfortable. I'll take the couch, Emily said immediately. You pay the bills, you get the bed. Jonathan shook his head. Not happening. They compromised. Jonathan on the couch, Emily in the bed. But before they could settle in, Emily's phone rang. It was Noah grinning from ear to ear on a video call. Mom, Mrs. Harris says you're stuck with Uncle Jonathan in a snowstorm. Are you playing games? Not yet, Emily laughed. You should 20 questions. It's the best. You'll learn stuff about each other, Noah insisted. An hour later, they were sitting by the fireplace, mugs of cocoa, in hand-volleying questions back and forth. Favorite food, Emily guessed. Jonathan hesitated. Cheeseburgers. Double bacon. At 2 a.m, when I'm working late. Emily laughed so hard she nearly spilled her drink. The mighty CEO loves greasy fast food. That's humanizing. Jonathan's turn, biggest fear. Elevators, Emily admitted. I'll take the stairs every time. The questions turned into stories, the stories into laughter, and before long, they found themselves in the small guest kitchen making pancakes. Or trying to. Jonathan's attempt to flip one midair ended in disaster. The pancake landed on the stove, a dish towel caught fire, and both of them ended up covered in flour, choking back laughter as they waved away the smoke. When the mess was cleaned up, they stood close flour dusting Emily's hair and Jonathan's suit pants. For a moment, neither moved. The storm outside seemed far away. Maybe we should order pizza, Jonathan said quietly. Maybe Emily agreed, her voice softer now. That night, Jonathan lay awake on the couch staring at the ceiling, realizing it had been years since he'd laughed like that. And Emily, curled under the blankets, found herself wondering how much longer she could keep pretending this was all an act. By the time March rolled in, the memory of Willow Creek Inn still lingered for Emily Carter. The late-night laughter, the ridiculous pancake disaster, the way Jonathan Price had looked at her when the firelight caught the edges of her hair. She tried to tell herself it was just part of the act. But every time she replayed it in her mind, the line between pretending and feeling blurred. Then came the headlines. Emily was finishing a delivery shift when her phone buzzed with a notification from a gossip site. She almost ignored it until she saw her own face staring back. The headline screamed, Jonathan Price's new love, angel or opportunist. Scrolling, her stomach turned. The article featured high-resolution photos of her leaving a Madison Avenue boutique, arms full of shopping bags, followed by shots at an upscale salon. The captions dripped with sarcasm, from pizza boxes to Prada. What a transformation. Emily's chest tightened. She knew exactly when those photos were taken. Weeks earlier, when Charles Price had arranged wardrobe fittings and grooming to prepare her for events. She hadn't spent a dime of her own money. But the article twisted the story into something ugly. By the next day, the story was everywhere. Talk shows speculated about her real motives. Social media lit up with strangers dissecting her life. And then the reporters showed up. Outside her apartment, outside Noah's school, shouting questions she refused to answer. She tried calling Jonathan. No answer. She left messages. Finally, 2 days later, he called back, his voice tight. Emily, I've seen the news. Jonathan, those photos. You know your father set that up. I didn't buy any of it. I know, he said quickly. Then a pause. But this, it's hurting the company's image. My father's furious. Emily felt a cold weight settle in her stomach. What are you saying? Maybe we should take a break until things calm down. The words hit harder than she expected. A break, she repeated. It's just business, Jonathan added, but even he didn't sound convinced. Emily swallowed hard. Right, business. After they hung up, she stood in her small kitchen phone, still in her hand, staring at the wall. She told herself she shouldn't be surprised. This was an arrangement, nothing more. But the truth burned in her chest. Somewhere along the way, it had stopped feeling like just a job. Over the next 6 weeks, Emily went back to work under her mother's maiden name, taking small catering gigs and low-profile delivery routes. She avoided the news, avoided the places she and Jonathan had been seen together. But the ache of that phone call stayed with her, heavy and unshakable, not just because of what was said, but because of the silence that followed. The grand auction at the Astoria Plaza was in full swing when Jonathan Price stepped through the massive glass doors, his polished shoes clicking against the marble. For weeks, he'd been replaying that phone call with Emily Carter in his head. The cool tone in his voice, the way she'd gone quiet before agreeing to take a break. He hated every second of it now. The ballroom glittered with crystal chandeliers and the chatter of New York's elite. On stage, the auctioneer rattled off bids for a vintage pearl necklace, the crowd's attention fixed on the raised paddles. But Jonathan's eyes scanned the room for only one person. He found her near the back, wearing the black uniform of the catering staff, her hair pinned neatly under a simple clip. She was carrying a tray of empty champagne flutes, moving swiftly between guests, head down, as if trying to disappear. Jonathan's pulse kicked up. "Emily," his voice cut across the room. The auctioneer faltered mid-sentence. Conversations hushed. 300 heads turned toward the man in the tailored navy suit striding across the floor. Emily froze the tray, trembling slightly in her hands. Jonathan reached the stage in a few long strides and turned to the stunned auctioneer. "I need the microphone." "Sir, we're in the middle of—" "It's the perfect time," Jonathan said firmly, already taking it. He turned to face the room, but his gaze was locked on Emily. "A few months ago, I met a woman. She spilled champagne on me, called me an elegant penguin, and somehow made me laugh harder than I have in years. She also taught me more about what matters than any business deal ever could." The crowd chuckled softly. Emily's cheeks burned. Jonathan's voice grew steadier. "She showed me that helping a stranger is more important than making it to a meeting on time. That the best moments in life are messy and unplanned. And I ruined it, because I was afraid. Afraid it was too good to be true." He stepped off the stage and walked toward her. The sea of guests parted. Emily's eyes were bright, but her expression unreadable. "I'm sorry for doubting you when I should have trusted you," Jonathan said, stopping just in front of her. "I'm sorry for choosing my reputation over your heart. And I'm sorry for every day I've spent without you in my life." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small velvet box. Dropping to one knee, he flipped it open to reveal a delicate diamond ring. "Emily Carter, will you marry me? For real? No contracts, no pretending. Just you, me and Noah. A real family." The room went utterly silent. Emily's breath caught. "You're an idiot," she whispered, her lips trembling into a smile. "A beautiful, stubborn, completely crazy idiot. Is that a yes?" "It's a yes," she said, laughing through tears. The ballroom erupted in applause as Jonathan slipped the ring on her finger and pulled her into his arms. For the first time in months, Emily felt the weight lift from her chest. And for the first time ever, it didn't feel like an act. 3 months after the grand auction, Central Park looked like something out of a dream. Beneath a clear blue sky, the Bethesda fountain sparkled in the afternoon sun, framed by bursts of spring blooms. Rows of gold chairs curved into a semicircle, filled with an eclectic mix of guests, executives in tailored suits, delivery drivers and their Sunday-best neighborhood friends who'd watched Emily Carter hustle for years, and a few curious socialites who simply couldn't resist the spectacle. At the aisle's entrance, 6-year-old Noah stood proudly in a pale gray suit, tossing flower petals with dramatic flair. "Don't skimp, people," he called, to the bridesmaids sending the front rows into laughter. Then Emily appeared. She wore a simple satin gown with delicate lace sleeves. Nothing flashy, but so perfectly her. On her arm was her stepfather, who had stepped in for her parents long ago. The moment Jonathan Price saw her standing at the altar in his charcoal tuxedo, the noise of the crowd faded. "You can breathe, son," Charles Price murmured at his side. "Not yet," Jonathan replied, eyes locked on Emily. The ceremony was warm and personal, officiated by a family friend, who opened with, "We're here today to celebrate a love story that began with spilled champagne and turned into something unshakably real." The guests chuckled knowingly. Jonathan's vows came first. "Emily, You've taught me that family is a choice we make every day. You've shown me that courage isn't about closing deals. It's about stopping the car for someone in need even when it's inconvenient. I promise to make you laugh every day, to keep pancake mix in the kitchen, and to never forget that the best plans are the ones we never planned. Emily's turn. Jonathan, you came into my life like a storm I didn't see coming, and you stayed. You taught me that sometimes princes wear suits instead of armor, and that love can be just as much about laughter as it is about promises. I promise to always challenge you to spill the truth when life gets too serious, and to remind you that you'll always be my elegant penguin. When the rings were exchanged, after Jonathan briefly fumbled and tried to put his on his own finger, earning more laughter, the officiant declared them husband and wife. Jonathan kissed her under a shower of petals flung wildly by Noah, who yelled about time. At the reception, guests danced to a playlist that mixed smooth jazz with Noah's favorite cartoon theme songs. Executives ate hot dogs from the stand Emily insisted on, while socialites tried to master hopscotch in the grass. Later, Jonathan lifted Noah into his arms. I promise to be the best dad I can be, he told him. And I promise to keep Mom laughing. Noah grinned. Even when you're grumpy. As the sun dipped low over the park, Emily leaned against Jonathan. So, husband, how does it feel? He smiled, kissing her temple. Like my real life just started. The journey from that first frantic night at Parkview Towers to the golden glow of their Central Park wedding hadn't been a straight path for Emily, Jonathan, or Noah. It had been messy, unpredictable, and, at times, painfully uncertain. But every twist, every awkward dinner, every confrontation and setback had slowly woven something stronger than either of them expected. For Emily, it was proof that you didn't have to fit the mold to belong somewhere, or with someone. She had walked into Jonathan's world carrying a takeout bag and a sleeping child, never imagining she'd leave it in a wedding dress, hand in hand with a man who had once been just a stranger in a lobby. For Jonathan, it was the reminder that life's real wealth wasn't measured in numbers or reputation, but in moments. Like chasing Noah across a patch of grass, laughing with Emily in a snowstorm kitchen, or holding her hand under the soft hush of rain. He'd learned that being in control all the time left no room for the surprises that make life worth living. Noah, of course, didn't need speeches to explain any of it. To him, it was simple. They were a family now. Not because of a ring, a contract, or even a wedding, but because they showed up for each other every single day. As they drove away from the park that night, petals still clinging to Emily's veil, Jonathan glanced in the rearview mirror at Noah dozing off in the back seat. Emily reached for his hand, their fingers intertwining naturally. The city lights stretched ahead bright and endless, and for once neither of them was thinking about where they were supposed to be. They were exactly where they wanted to be, together.